Hey guys, how are you? I think it's so interesting this kind of idea to not know what to do in life. And especially for men, I think it seems almost much worse than for women if you don't know what to do. And I think a lot of times if you push it without coming really from the inside, not being intrinsic, but coming from an extrinsic kind of source where somebody is trying to instill upon you something, or you have the feeling that you took in so much information that you're not really acting from the inside. And I think there are people in this world that have a different have a little bit different mission than most other people on this earth. So rather than doing a normal 9 to 5 and having kids and raising them and on so forth, I think there are people like me who have, um I wouldn't compare it and say like deeper sense of purpose, but I would say that they have like a more nuanced way of going about things, and the only way to do this is through deep introspection, which means sitting a lot in silence and letting things arise out of themselves. Because otherwise, you're going to tend to jump from one idea to the next. And a lot of people do this. There are tremendous amounts of people who jump from one idea to the next, not because they lack conviction of the actual idea might be good. I think it stems more from the unfulfilled, deep inner spiritual or soul longing with the idea that they are running with. So if, for example, let's say you start a job or you start a business and you do it and you feel after a short period of time it doesn't feel like it's fulfilling you, it's because your soul has a much deeper necessity to be fulfilled with what they're doing than other people. That's 100% for sure. It's 100% for sure that there is a deeper meaning that gets lost in what you're doing right now. So the the solution to it is really figure out, and this is not going to be easy, but really figure out what is it deep in your soul that is not being fulfilled with what you're doing right now. And so you might start a project, you might do something, and you feel like after, let's say, a month, you give it up. It's and look at try to look at what is really missing. Like what is the real thing that I'm seeking within that project. And I think for myself, speaking for myself, I think it's a truly deeper meaning, which goes much further than the economic aspect or the superficial, what we call so-called success aspect. So if I say, for example, with Bliss Cards, the startup that I'm launching, I feel like there is a deeper, it's like a vehicle, it's like a transport mechanism of spiritual information. And I think this in a lot of other things that I've tried to do in the past, that was lacking. So when I said to myself, okay, I'm going to do this. Let's say I have an inventive, innovative idea in social networking. It is one thing to launch a social network, and you could superficially say, well, that's spiritual anyway as well. But if you have a deeper meaning in your soul that you feel needs to be expressed or transported, then that might not be enough. Although to the rational mind, it might seem that it's enough because you can communicate with what you're doing. You can communicate as freely as you want. So, um, but it's not entirely true because maybe in your soul, you're supposed to be the medium of change, meaning that if if for example I was a tantra masseur for women, right? So I did around 1,000 massages with women, and I felt that I'm 100% there, and I'm 100% giving myself to the session, and thereby I transport the entirety of my being into the session. And I felt pretty complete in that sense. And so when I was doing tantra massages, I didn't have a feeling like as if something were lacking. And I think this is the kind of dilemma a lot of virtual or online internet startups have, is that they do something because they have been kind of almost brainwashed into believing that that is the way to go. And sometimes these people end up in big depressions, in sometimes even in suicide, sometimes in they need psychiatrists, sometimes um because they are kind of they're stuck in that loop, in that kind of rat race loop, and they're not realizing that a huge chunk of their soul mission, their soul plan, their deeper desires are not being met. And you cannot not everyone can have the absolute normal regular standard plan. Some people really need to look deeper into the soul plan and see what else is there that needs to be conveyed and communicated and transported in the business that I'm doing, so I feel totally complete. And I think it's super important because it is the in your waking state, it's the majority of time that you are spending. So if you wake up at 7 a.m., you're and 8 or 9, you're in the job, you leave at 5 or 6. That's a huge chunk of your lifetime. And to spend it on something that you don't feel completes you in a on a soul level is in my view a huge waste of life force and lifetime and opportunity to grow in this life. So um I think it's good to look at what makes you switch ideas, or what makes you feel that you're not completed in the work that you do, and really dig deep and take your time to look at different perspectives of yourself that are outside of the economic ones or the very obvious ones. Like, for example, am I here to convey and communicate some spiritual message? Am I here to be transformed myself in that which I do? Uh, am I supposed to influence and reach a lot of people? How am I supposed to feel, or what is supposed to happen to me as I do this? when do I feel the most fulfilled? What is the actual moment of feeling of completion? Um, those kind of answers, because otherwise you're chasing a hollow dream. You're chasing someone else's dream. You're not chasing your dream. The only way you're chasing your dream is if in the thing that you do you feel some kind of completion. And if you feel that you're actually, like, within, let's say, a month or 2 months of doing something, you feel like you're at the wrong place or you are not excited anymore about what you're doing, then it's obvious that you've missed the deeper message that life is trying to tell you. And never compare yourself to others, because if you compare yourselves to others, then you tend to take on their missions, their soul plan missions, and that just doesn't work, because you are in your soul completely unique. So when you read about other people or you compare yourself to people you work with or to competitors or whoever, then you tend to take on their mission and you tend to copy them. And I think that's the absolute essence of self-love, authenticity, and integrity towards yourself, is knowing with 100% certainty where that feeling of completion and fulfillment is. Because otherwise, everything you do, you will only do half-heartedly, or you will not complete it, or you will just switch from one thing to the next. And that can be super tough if you feel that everyone else has their thing and you don't have your thing. Um, and I think, looking at my own life, I feel like I know I have a mission that is so different, from 99.99999% of the people out there. Because if I look at what they're doing roughly, and look what I'm doing roughly and what I feel pulled in and drawn in, it's something completely different than most people. And the trick here is to give yourself the time and look at it from different perspectives to really understand it, what it is that moves you, which moments in your career or business, which moments are the ones that complete you. And there are people, there are soul missions, and this is absolutely fine, who have a tough working day where they say, I love my job 50%, I 50%, I hate it. They come home to their kids and they feel like complete. For them, everything is fine. They don't feel like um, they'll just accept it and compromise in that workspace because they feel completed by coming home to their kids. And I think um, I have to get this tissue because I don't like polluting here. And so I think spirituality is first and foremost about letting go. Um, there is no spirituality without letting go. And letting go means letting go of impulses and thoughts that seem to want you to push into a certain direction immediately, like getting rid of the impulse, or ignoring the impulse to do something immediately, to be like knee jerk kind of actions and reactions, and just sit with it and feel like, because energetically what's happening is that there are energies coming from the bottom and energies coming from the top, and the ones that are coming from the bottom, which are coming from the root and sacral chakra, they're kind of like forcing you to come into this kind of like high energy survival procreation. And this is where most people are. And when you're in silence and relaxing, the energies open up more, and the energy from the top flows down towards your heart, and that's where you get what I call the heart intuition. And the heart intuition is how I started with the tantra massages, for example. And I think that if when you find that inner fire, and the inner fire comes from the sense of completion when something certain happens, then you will not be limited by outside events and forces. So, what I'm saying is, let's say you feel completed being a teacher of children in Ecuador, just as an example, and you love to see the faces as they light up when they learn something. That for you, in that moment, that's your completion. Kind of like your soul mission completion. And if you don't feel it, and you don't feel it at all, this kind of the sense of deep inner completion in any moment in time in your business or career or job, then you're basically in the wrong job, simply said. And some people will go all of their life without this. And I think that it's a good this video is a good reflection for everyone, including for me, to look deeper and see if there are things in life that gives you that sense of completion. And it seems to be like a your karma, your energy system kind of like demands these kind of events, you could say. You literally had a similar thought just last night. Wow, amazing. Mate, it's full moon, so maybe it would mean if more people have this thought this time, that maybe the moon is pulling up these certain frequencies right now. Because the full moon, to explain the full moon pulls up all the energies. The full moon is almost like Kundalini awakening in a sense, because it pulls up all the energies and makes you look at things that you haven't looked at before. And that's why also people say lunatic. Lunatic, the crazy one, comes from the fact that the moon pulls up old emotions, old karmic wounds, and that people who are not conscious cannot handle this type of energy and just become reactive to that energy. That's what we are talking about when you cannot sit in silence and you just are reactive to whatever is happening as the energy pulls up. Then you become a lunatic. So, for example, let's say you have in your karmic energy field or trauma field, you have some abuse, let's say, which creates anger and then lashes out to the outside because you don't realize that you're projecting, then the moon will pull up this energy and then you will start to act it out like this. And that's why where the term lunatic comes from. And through my sensitivity, I have the ability to feel these things and see what's actually happening in the energetic field as it happens. And that's why I can communicate it so clearly, because I have these sensitivities. My kind of um there's a I know several languages, and in the language of German there is a word which is called Hellfühligkeit. Hellfühligkeit means kind of clairvoyance, but towards feelings. So I can sense energetic fields and feelings and energy pathways much stronger than others. And it's kind of like an HSP towards this specific frequency. And that allows me to sense and clear blockages in others and also see them in myself. And as this energy arises, you Most people are overwhelmed. That's why when you're tired, when you're hangry, you didn't eat, and all of these energies from the bottom creep up, and the body goes into tension, and you are not able to handle all of these energies in your brain, and that's why you overreact. And the interesting about sitting in silence, like in vipassana, or abiding in the self, like Mooji teaches, or being in the now, as Eckhart Tolle teaches, is that it automatically increases the pressure. I call it like the pressure cooker, where just as in the full moon, these energies are pushed up. The difference between doing it consciously in vipassana or meditation, or resting, abiding in the self, is that you are allowing consciously the energy to rise, and you are aware of what's happening and not pushing it down. Whereas the lunatic, or the kind of the unconscious person, it hits a certain blockage in the body. So, for example, if you have anger in the sacral chakra and the solar plexus would be then choleric, and it hits the blockage, the energy starts to build up there, and it's trying to find a way to the outside. So that's why you become so forceful. So you're like, how the fuck, why are you doing this? That's kind of like the choleric one, because the energy builds up in the stomach. Whereas the conscious person, the vipassana, and abiding in the self, you realize how the energy builds up, but you are consciously not reacting to it, but you're observing it from the neutral place. And that way, the energy channels, the nadis, which push up the energies further, can surface to the point where you then can cry out this energy. And because behind every anger is sadness, and behind every this energy is always a trauma. So there's always the fear of completing and reliving the sadness. And in vipassana, you are actually allowing yourself, your karmic field, to complete itself by letting that energy out. And what most people do most of the time is they're pushing the energy down all the time. That's why some people in their energy field stay traumatized and stay in their patterns, in their vasanas all the time. So a narcissist with choleric narcissist will remain a choleric narcissist until he releases this type of energy. But for that, he needs to raise his consciousness, and that can happen through the outside or through another traumatic experience, but mostly through being in touch with a higher vibration from the outside, be that ayahuasca, be that an energy session, a breath work, whatever. The moment a low energy person comes into contact with a higher energy outside force, and high vibration, there is the opportunity to become more conscious, and with the right communication and guidance, they can let go of uh this trauma. And this is basically what all of the healers out there are doing. Doesn't matter if they're body worker or ayahuasca shamans or whatever. That's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to people who are ripe for healing. They come to those people, and they, with a certain amplitude, give them a higher vibration, a higher frequency, and thereby they can open this wound up in a safe space environment. And this is what most of society right now, I say 80 to 90% of people in society are toxic, because they're running around with their traumas, unconscious, projecting it toward the outside. Everyone else is responsible for their misery, but not they themselves, that they can heal themselves. They don't know that. And that is kind of, in summary, it's kind of the whole process of our karmic experience in this incarnation. and we keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it until we come to this higher vibrational outside force. And usually we need things to become really, really difficult, and the universe has this nag to, if you're within that negative karmic loop, to give you harder and harder and harder experiences until one moment you wake up, until one moment you realize, oh, okay, I need to change something. And then if the universe, I call it was the universe, you might call it God, whatever, if the grace is there, then the kind of the teacher will show up. And it might be the healer, it might be your neighbor, whoever, and comes within with a higher frequency. And the moon, the cycles of the moon allow you to take that as kind of like an auspicious time to eat a little bit less because you're not clogging down the system. So 2-3 days before and after the moon, you should eat a little bit less, and you should like go more into a introvert, introspective, um resting, abiding in the self, in order to take advantage of that, because that's almost like a free session. And don't try to judge or analyze what's popping up, because in the moon phase, in the full moon phase, you have stronger dreams, because during the day you might be busy, right? You're doing your work, but when you lie down and you dream, then the moon, the full moon, is at night, and as you're relaxing, it's pushing all the energies through the chakras upwards, and so you're receiving a lot of information. That's why during the full moon, especially if you're sensitive to it, it can be very unsettling as to what you're dreaming and what you're experiencing. And the most important thing is to not judge it. And then in the morning when you wake up and you see like, I'm not feeling that like uplifted because the dream has really pushed you down a little bit. The best is just to sit in silence and let that energy pass. Let it pass by itself. If you go into kind of like, there's another very interesting German word which is Übersprungshandlung, which means over jump action. It's kind of like, instead of doing something that you should be doing, you're doing something else in order, kind of like an avoidance mechanism, avoidance action, in order to not do what you should be really doing. And a lot of times we do things um, in order for not to feel something else. So we kind of like, the same goes with food. Sometimes we eat food because we don't want to sense loneliness. Sometimes we do sports because we cannot stand our restlessness, and so forth. And we do a lot of these so-called Übersprungshandlungen, the kind of like avoidance mechanism actions. And it's important to recognize them. And Rupert Spira, which is not one of my favorite t-shirts, but he's absolutely right in this one, is when you feel an action that might be one of those avoidance mechanism actions, sit first 10 minutes in silence and realize why you really want to do that. Sometimes it can be any kind of action. It can, watching a movie, playing computer games, might be actually an avoidance action in order to not feel unresolved karma. And during the full moon, that might become even more evident, because you feel very unsettled, because the full moon doesn't make a pause, doesn't it pushes all the frequencies forward. It's the full moon is not going to be like, oh, I'm just going to give him like a little bit. No, it pushes all the frequencies forward and upward, and that makes it super difficult to be like to ignore it, to be like because it's going to show you the root chakra fears, and those are usually the most intense and the brutal ones. And we've seen that during COVID, where the root chakra was activated, how many people were motivated from the outside to do things that they now may be regretting. And a lot of people are regretting what they've been doing, and it came from the root chakra. And This root chakra is the core blockages of most modern civilization people. So this is what also Osho talked about a lot. That's why he invented active meditation, all of this stuff, because he saw that the root chakra is really the major blockage of everyone. And it's very, very hard to let go, because it's really, the root chakra is really the at the cusp of like being totally free or being a slave, apparently a slave to bodily functions. And that one is probably the toughest to solve, because you need to lose completely your fear of death and fear of disease and fear of being nobody and losing yourself as person. And so one could even say that if there was no fear in the root chakra, then all of our kundalinis would be open. We're actually pushing down the kundalini because we are so fearful of seeing the reality of things, and the kind of the sadness of all our ancestors, the sadness of, if you think about it, our DNA, our epigenetic information carries all of the fear, all of the sadness, all of the struggle of literally everyone that came before you, like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. Everything, all of that information is stored in you. Now, energetically, you might say, when people talk about, it's going like back 7 generations or something, that's not true. It literally goes like way all the way back. If you think about all of this energy is inside of you, all of it, and to different degrees for sure, but it's there. The energy is there. And so you might be, even in life, you might be even struggling with stuff that has not truly happened in your life. And that's why we talk about karma and vasanas, things, energies that are in some way blocking your energy system, and are and experiences keep repeating, where you're like, why is that happening? Why is that happening? And the interesting thing is, if I look back, I'm very good in recognizing patterns. And if I look back at my life, 46 years, I recognize that there are certain parts where a big jump happens, big shift. And one of these shifts, or usually always the shift happens when I rest and abide in emptiness. And I release myself from past karma. And from my experience, listening also to others, I met an Indian guy in Portugal who said his strongest push forward was through Vipassana in comparison to tons of other modalities that he's done. And he was truly a remarkable guy. And I remember I had a very strong root chakra blockage, and then I sat a few days in silence and I released some of that energy. And a week later, I immediately had the idea and the impulse, and all synchronicities seemed to align to do the van life. And that's, since then, for 3 years, I've been doing van life. I've been on the road all the time. And before that, I wouldn't have been able to imagine to do van life on my own in places like this where there's absolutely nobody. And very often I get the question, are you not fearful being alone in these places outside where nobody is, and so forth? And I say 99% of the time I'm not. I'm actually very happy. I love doing it. And being completely alone makes, to me, absolutely no difference. In fact, now I'm coming to the point where I actually feel much better alone than with somebody together. So when I get to meet someone and there might be a date or something like that with a woman, I feel like I'm not sure even I want to go on a date because I really feel comfortable here. If I have my food, I have my technology here, I have the nature, I have the tranquility. I feel like I don't want to get a lower vibration being into my surrounding because I've learned to love myself and I've learned to give it a certain vibration that I don't want to be affected from the outside with what I call the mud. I call it the mud because the mud is something that pulls you that makes you dirty and pulls you down. And I feel the energy of most people are muddy and it pulls you down. So you're trying to be like optimistic, high vibration, la 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 la. And I feel that people unintentionally, I'm not saying they do this intentionally, it's just their karma or their situation, they pull you down. And I noticed these in the words they use, in the things they say. I noticed this kind of nuanced, like, words and phrases they use where I can literally sense that mud. I can literally sense like how the relationship with that person would be and what the conflict would be even before I really know them. Because already by the way they talk, the way they structure their vibration and what they do and what they say, I can sense that pulling down. And I think there is an autonomous kind of like kind of the yogi or the conscious person that learned to work on themselves and they have the techniques to do that and to be in a high vibration state almost all the time. It's very hard to bear this kind of low vibration mud around you. So, for example, tomorrow is probably the day that I need to go into a supermarket to buy some stuff. And I have to go into the city nearby. And when I spend the day in the city and then I come outside again, I literally, the last time I was in the city for a few days, I literally felt like I need to get out of there. And what I realized is that most people are drawn to the city because of these low chakra reasons. Um, and there's a lot of the energy draws the city draws energy from you. The city pulls you down. The city sucks you dry from the noise, from the energy pollution, everything. Everything. The city is there's the city to me feels like a muddy place energetically. And when you're highly sensitive, you sense that. Like you know it. And then you need to get out. And so I'm at the point where I don't even want to go into cities anymore. And the reason people stick in the cities, you will notice, for example, notice that people that live more in nature, they don't tend to dress sexy. But as people move into the city, they start to dress up and they start to dress more sexy because they are in competition with the other, people in their group. And what's happening is that they're trying to grab the attention from the other people in the city. So what I noticed is, especially when you're in nature like I'm a long time and you're highly sensitive and you come into the city, you sense that contrast super clearly. What they're actually doing is there is a very dirty energy in the city and it's all about survival and sexuality. Like the serious Sex and the City. It's all about that, and it feels very muddy because it's very one-dimensional. It doesn't have the higher chakras, it doesn't have the heart chakra. When I visited one of the largest cities in the world, and I wasn't like I just that was already while I was doing the tantra massages, so I knew a lot about energies already, and I was sensing the city. I could sense there was so much lack of heart energy. It was brutal. And when I came with an open heart energy to people and talk to them in the city, they completely light up like a heart, like a flower. And I was super surprised, and that was the moment I realized, like, these cities are fundamentally sick, and we don't see it because it's all concrete, it's all radio frequency, um, all kinds of pollution in all kinds of frequencies, and the people themselves with their broken chakra systems are affecting other people in the same chakra system. So I believe also there's certain regional or city collective consciousness and collective energies that kind of like in a dynamic system kind of build themselves. So you come into a city, and if you're highly sensitive, you can sense the city. You can sense what kind of energy this city has. And every city is truly a little bit different. It starts with the feng shui, one with ground chakra, the chakras, who is the mayor, who how they're communicating, what is the economy there. And it's super interesting because nature itself has this kind of clean, smooth, harmonious kind of feel to it. It feels super clean. Like when I sense the energy from this like field next to the lake, it feels super clean. There's nothing muddy about it. Like, and when I go into the city, I can sense the mud that pulls you down. And so what I noticed is that women, as they try to be sexier and sexier in these cities, are trying to grab the attention from the men. They are pulling that energy, but they're really not interested. They're just pulling that energy. And what I noticed is if cities didn't have any women, if cities had absolutely no women, men wouldn't be in the cities. So I believe the cities are actually drawing people in through not only the job offers, of course, but also through the sexuality. So cities, I love the title "Sex in the City" because it literally, I don't know the show, but I love the title because it literally tells everything about what city is about. It's literally about this pulling of energy, um, and but on the other hand, it's taking your energy away. So it's drawing you in, it's activating your sacral chakra because you have these women around you. So your sacral chakra is activated and you're like, "Ooh, wow, okay." But at the same time, it's actually sucking you dry. So what's happening is actually that the city is like a drug. It's giving you pleasure on one frequency, but sucking you dry on other frequencies. And that is brutal. If you don't see it, you are actually hurting your energy system without realizing. And the dilemma in that is if you don't have a wife, if you don't have children, you feel like obligated to go into the city in order to meet someone. And that's this dynamic, this social dynamic of this kind of like experience is to me is super interesting because I have the ability to like watch deeper into that energy field and not see it like as a it's almost like I can see. I told this in another stream on another channel, like a few days ago or a few weeks ago, where I said, I feel like since a few weeks, I have the ability to sense whole cities rather than sensing certain individuals within the city, which of course I can do as well. But I'm starting to sense like the whole city, which before wasn't so clear. So this seems to be like almost like something new that I unlocked, where I can literally I can sense the whole city, and it's super interesting because people are much more susceptible to cosmologic and weather and energy patterns than they realize. So when they live in a certain place, or the weather or the pressure or everything changes, literally, or the moon changes cosmologically, everything changes. The mood of everyone in the city changes. And it's funny, I recognize it, but a lot of people don't recognize it. And it's super interesting to observe. So we are much more slaves to our surrounding than we believe. We believe like, oh, our day is always the same, and everything seems to be the same. But in reality, we're being massively influenced from the outside. And the moon was just one example, because that just has a big force, because we are 70% water, 60-70% water, and depending on the organ, and the moon is literally pulling and pushing in different directions. And it's the same thing, like, when you say that during the moon you should do certain harvests and certain rituals, because the plants, the minerals and certain energies are being pushed up towards the top of the plant, and that's why you should cut them at that point. And so that's why full moon rituals in certain sense do make sense if you're looking for certain minerals or activations or energies within the plant. And there's so much energetically and spiritually and metaphysically that we have absolutely no clue about, that we just don't know at all. And as a society, and that's, to me, is almost like bizarre, because when you speak to people who think only scientifically and logically, you realize how much they discount and how much they don't take into account things that, to me, for example, as an energy healer, are super real. For example, just the fact that I can give an orgasm to a woman without touching her. Now, the energy orgasm thing from Tantra, it's becoming, and from kind of like Reiki, it's becoming more common to know about this, especially people like spiritual people that listen about, learn about Kundalini awakening process or some of these kind of things. They are starting to see these things and learn this through the YouTube, but the majority of people have like no idea. So they don't even know what is possible in intimacy and energetically, and but also the pitfalls of it. Because if I have a certain person around me, whether in the family or in business or in the bus or in the train or in the plane, that person's energy is affecting my energy field. And when you realize that 90% of people are toxic and have a heavy karma with them, then you feel more and more compelled to just not be next to them. Like, I'm thinking of taking a trip with my mother to the Philippines in late of this year, and but I already feel like a little bit of tension, you could say, because I already know that I'm gonna have to pass and be with so many people. The moment I had to go from Faro to with the when I was flying to Switzerland, and I was going from Faro to Lisbon to Zurich, um, the energy at all of these places was super bad. And actually, I got really sick when I was flying back, and I had like tonsillitis like for 2 weeks or so. And it's because these energies are so bad. And I had it up to here. I was like, oh, I just want to arrive. Like, and it was autumn, so a lot of people were sick and so forth. But I could sense, like, you only get really sick when your energy system is compromised energetically. So, when you're, for example, one thing that you should be very careful about is when you start to curse. When you start to curse, like fuck shit, that's the moment, leave everything, because your energy system is already attacked. When you recognize yourself cursing, immediately stop everything and take a walk, go outside, completely drop everything. Nothing is going to come out of it if you continue. And the only bad things. And the full moon is super interesting because my advice is if you have important decisions that need mental clarity and emotional kind of like um apathic or kind of like non-emotional like thinking, clear thinking, don't do it during the full moon. Um let the full moon pass 2 or 3 days after the full moon. You can start to make decisions, like important decisions. I'm talking like major life decisions and stuff like that. Because the moon is always the full moon is always the phase of conflict. It's always seeking conflict. And the reason it's seeking conflict is because as these energy rise, the um the energy wants to get resolved. And like I say, instead of sitting in silence and letting those emotions be resolved within yourself and letting them come up, maybe crying them out, you're actually projecting it outwards and seeking the conflict outside because you're trying actually to recreate the conflict from the past that you're unconscious of with someone else, and you're not seeking completion in that like constructive completion, which is like the real healing completion where you get rid of that baggage. And I call this knowing how to heal yourself with this. I call this taking out the garbage. Taking out the garbage is basically your your ability to release yourself from these energies without needing anything from the outside necessarily. You can get help from the outside, but most people don't know how to take out the garbage. So they're actually collecting bad energy all the time. They're collecting more and more and more and more and more bad energy without realizing it and then projecting it onto their spouse, onto their children, onto the workplace, on whoever. And this is what you're seeing right now in the US a lot. Because the US, I'm not from the US, but I see this like on videos and stuff on X and stuff. The tension in society, it's not just the US, it's everywhere. The tension in society is becoming more dense. And so they're like ping pong playing with those traumas. And that's also why if you're highly sensitive, you don't want to have to do anything with this matrix as it becomes more dense right now. Because you're like, I'm not gonna be if there's crossfire, I'm not gonna be in the middle. For what? So the society is getting more dense and you have to kind of escape from that. You have to get out of that thing. And one of the first things that's escaping the matrix is being conscious and red pilled of what's really going on. Wow, I actually never knew that. This is so new to learn. Yeah, I hope I hope you can use this information. This is stuff I'm 100 the stuff that I'm talking about now is 100%. I'm 100% like I guarantee you that this is how it is. As I'm not making it up. I cannot prove it to you like in a scientific way, but I know for 100% fact the way I'm explaining it, that's how it is. And so what I see is if I say I'm a high vibration individual or being, I realized that my vibration is bouncing like I'm bouncing off of myself up, you could say. And I recognize I don't want anything anymore to do. I don't want to be attached anymore to the matrix. And I'm going to say something interesting about business. As I did startup businesses in the last few years, I recognized it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's not just me saying it. I spoke to a couple of like entrepreneurs and real business people that, for example, own a hotel or even a hotel, like small hotel chain. And I spoke to various people or somebody, who works at a gas station. I spoke to an older woman that works at a gas station, the throughput she has. So she sees a lot of people. And so I sometimes ask people, do you feel like things changed the last 5, 10, 15 years? And everybody who has a sense of who's an adult, like mental maturity and physical and spiritual maturity and a psychic, also psychological, they everyone tells me the same thing, which I'm feeling is it's becoming more dense. People are more unhappy, they are more impolite, they have higher expectations, all of this stuff, and they'll complain about the little thing. Like in the past, you would go to a restaurant and you would complain, well, the food would make me puke, and you would leave a review. Let's say 10 years ago. Now you leave a bad review if I don't know if you feel that the the person who came to your the waiter came 5 minutes too late or something. So I think we're seeing a lot of that, and we're seeing that in all of like society and in our parts of life, and we're seeing also the video evidence of it. It's not just anecdotal evidence, but we're literally seeing like video evidence of it. And that means just that the matrix is becoming more dense. It's just becoming more dense. And so people like me feel more and more pushed out of this density, and they don't want to be part of it anymore. And now coming back to the startup, when I opened a couple of ideas and I started to get people in there into those ideas, like let's say it's an online community or whatever it was, I realized that the people that come in, like 90%, even more than 90%, are toxic. I don't want to deal with them. Like these customers or these people, you feel like you don't even want to deal with them anymore. It's like just give me your money and leave in a way, okay? And now I realized that if I want to run a startup, I have to come from a totally different perspective. And I have to say, okay, I'm going to start with a conscious community. Of course, it's going to be a small community. It's a small segment, but I'll feel good about it. I'll feel like I'm between the people that I vibe with similarly. So I can get 1,000 people on a project, be it an app or a website or whatever, and maybe just one person vibes with me and maybe becomes a customer or a joiner of the community or works with me as a team member. But it feels much more complete and much more congruent to the energy field that I am. And I think we're literally seeing this, whether lefties and wokies or far righters and magas or whoever, we're seeing men are becoming there are statistics for us. Men are becoming more conservative, whereas women are becoming slowly more left liberal. And what there's clear statistic on that. Men are going up like this, and the women slowly drifting down into left liberal. And so we're seeing this across every segment of society, that there's a polarization and people are drifting apart. And coupled with the toxicity, it's kind of like there seems to be almost no escape. Uh, that was when I was with my parents and all that, and I say we really need to change that. I tried telling you separate ways to stop arguing with parents. That was when I was in Sheffield studying mechanics. That was the hotel lady was saying to me at Travel Lodge. I think you're missing one message there because there's message retracted. So I'm not sure if you said everything you wanted to say, because I'm not sure exactly what the story is. But we're seeing this, definitely we're seeing this more and more. People having higher demands and sometimes even looking for, you know, one thing that I realized, for example, nowadays with women saying I'm single in the dating scene, one thing that I realized is a lot of women in Western Europe, I cannot talk about other places, but I'm talking about Western Europe, they discount you the minute you don't check off 10. Let's say they have 10 checkpoints and you are at 9 out of 10 is like green. If you don't get the 10 out of 10, they'll just say no, sorry, thank you. And I know why this is. I've talked to a lot of women. I understand their mentality. I know where they're coming from. I know why this is. I'm not trying to make it bad. What I'm trying to say is the world has changed. The matrix has become more dense. And the question is, how and where do you position yourself? And I think there's two options. One is to completely disconnect, say off grid and living here how I am with the van. And the second option is to create your own tribe, your own community, which has your vibration. Both are fine. The problem with being off grid on your own, if you don't have a wife and children, if you don't have a family, then it gets very libido suppressing. And libido suppressing is basically it can suck out the life energy, the life force from your energy body. Because, like in Tantien, the energy is below the navel, your life energy, that's where it accumulates. And if you want to activate it and keep it active and lively, you need the opposite energy. You need the feminine energy as a man, and vice versa. So, on one hand, we kind of need the cities. On the other hand, the cities are sucking us dry. So, what I'm saying is, the whole society is completely wrong on how it is set up right now. We're completely wrong on how we're doing things. The only thing that I would say is positive is not in all aspects, but in many, is modern medicine. So if you want to have a tooth pulled because you have an infection, perfect, right? You want to have, surgery because your knee is, broken, whatever, your leg is broken, perfect. Penicillin, antibiotics, whatever you need. But everything else, in my view, and logistics is great. You know that you can have food and herbs from all over the world. But a lot of other stuff is just really massively broken. Fast fashion, for example, completely broken, complete bullshit. And the consumer culture is highly toxic with highly toxic materials and dyes and whatever. And so you have an individual choice what you do as an individual in the society, where how are you going to spend your time. And I think we're living in a time where it's absolutely okay to go off grid, fully off grid, and say the next 10 years I'm just not going to do anything, because everything's going to change so rapidly and there's no way of predicting of and knowing what you should really be doing. So off grid is completely okay and fine and correct. Or you say, okay, I want to be part of this change, so I'm going to create my own community, be it online or offline, where these certain vibrational people are that match your frequency. But you have to do it in a self-sustaining way, or in like and the community must be in itself kind of self-sustaining, because otherwise you're bringing in that energy from outside, from the matrix anyway. Yeah, I think that message got deleted, so I don't know exactly. I can read it again, but I don't think I'll get the gist of it. So maybe you write it shorter or more on a different way, so I can understand what you wanted to say. So, and I'm just now with, for example, with my idea with Blitz cards, I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna try this. It's I don't feel pressure to be like to say like this must work, but I feel like compelled to find a way to make this work. And I think there's enough people that when they come together, they'll feel like, oh, this is something really good, and we'll start to slowly spread the word. This is kind of like the idea. And in terms of like, you almost have like the second option, which was like the create your own community, also goes for like which what they call like geomaxing. I'm not talking only about dating, I'm talking about generally like geomaxing in terms of like go somewhere where people are not that affected by the matrix, where they literally live with the benefits maybe of the matrix, like modern medicine, but they're not culturally so influenced by it. And I think certain areas, for example, that are highly touristic might have that advantage. Might be Costa Rica, might be the Philippines, that are highly touristic because the tourists ensure that money from the matrix comes there and that the area is built out. It's kind of, it has facilities and language to kind of accommodate the matrix people. But it's exotic enough and the local culture disconnected enough to not be influenced by the negativity of the matrix, of the modern matrix. So let's say, for example, you have a small island somewhere where there's a certain amount of tourism, and so you have a couple of doctors, maybe modern medicine, you have good logistics, you have food and stuff like that, smaller or larger island. But the locals are not really living the matrix life. And I think that's definitely another option. If you're rich, of course, you go to into a community of rich people that are not living within the matrix. That is also an option. For example, older people that haven't been yet influenced so much by social media but have old money, that might be also good in theory. But they're probably not gonna be high vibration because they are still taking in that old energy from the past of how things were in the past with school and with wars and everything. So, I think it's very interesting to contemplate on one side, like on a mega trend consciousness level, what is happening spiritually and metaphysically right now in society, in nature, cosmologically, and on the other hand, to think about it, how do I react to it as an individual? How do I react to it, maybe even as someone who still has some kind of ambition? And that is to me is very, very, very exciting. And but we have to recognize that with being very pragmatic, with artificial intelligence that is coming now, everything is gonna change really quickly and really hard. Like the next 1 to 3 years is gonna be brutal. And literally every business in the world, without any nothing is being left out, is being revolutionized with AI, is being changed with AI. Right now it's being changed and very soon it's being revolutionized. Where the X-ray analysis is better by the AI than by the doctor, where the operation is better by the AI than by the surgeon, where the business analysis is better by the AI than the business analyst, where basically anything, robotics, AI, all of that stuff. So we're gonna see a huge shift, and you cannot predict the technological singularity. You cannot predict like what's gonna happen. There's no way in nobody, no matter how high your IQ or your knowledge or whatever, or spiritual attachment to akashic records, you cannot predict what will happen because it's such an intelligence. If you have an intelligence that has 1,000 IQ and it's running parallel like a million instances, you have like no fucking idea what it will come up with. And so far, everything that we've done as humans has been mostly for the improving of our comfort. How can we improve our comfort? From the pencil to the fire to the washing machine to the car. How can we improve our comfort? But the AI will not be aligned with that idea. It will partially be, initiated to work with this idea, but it will definitely go in tangents and create things which are not aligned with that idea. And that, to us as humans, is highly unpredictable. And it's highly unsettling because if it has its own impulses and missions, and we're not just talking about the technical AI, we're talking about I forgot the word, what it's called. It's kind of like a cyborg AI where you actually have a brain, an artificial brain connected with senses to an AI. So the robotics connected to the AI and actual cells, neurons connected to AI that are lab made. And I think there's a company out there, I forgot what the name was. They actually sell these cartridges where you have artificial brain in that cartridge and it's being kept alive, those cells. It's brutal. So probably you've heard it here the first time if you haven't heard about it yet. And I was like, I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming already like 5 years ago, but I was surprised that it already exists and people can interface to that, like with computers and stuff. Brutal. So we'll see stuff that we can absolutely not predict. And it's really weird because sometimes, quite honestly, I'm not sure if to believe that this reality has some kind of substance or if, like Ramana Maharshi says, everything that we experience is truly a dream. I have no idea. I don't know. I'm gonna be super honest. Like I have no idea of the meaning of this life. I can recognize patterns, but I don't know if those patterns are Machiavellian, like, or mischievously induced into us. So, for example, in the movie The Matrix, when they were in the Matrix, they were being fed programs in order to feel entertained and release energy, right? So, we don't know if the reality that we're living is actually the same, that we're actually being fed stuff in order to keep it interesting, in order to release some kind of energy. I'm not saying it's like in the movie. I'm saying like what I'm saying is we have absolutely no way of knowing. And I think the most dystopian possibility, and I'm going to share it with you to destroy your day, the most dystopian, the absolute most dystopian possibility is that we're actually living in a prison that has no time limit and has no escape hatch or escape. So we are actually right now living in a prison that there is no escape from. So your consciousness or the consciousness is stuck in this reality. There is no other reality. Everything that you perceive is false. And but your consciousness is stuck in this kind of like narrow kind of band. Outside of that band, there's nothing. It's just this little box. And when you think you die, you're actually still stuck in that box. It's just the image, the experience is changing, but you as consciousness are still stuck in the box. And everything else is just romanticizing the situation. So, like reincarnation, religion, God, love. By the way, I have a very interesting theory for you guys. It's going to be super interesting how you react to this. Love. This is going to be hard. And those just is hypothesis, not I'm not saying it's how it is. But what if love is actually, because I noticed that women and men love differently in a way. And what if love is actually just a biological impulse for the man to be able to give up his resources because otherwise he would be so um self-interested that he would say, why should I give up my resources that I in a difficult way kind of collected? So if I got resources, if I got the meat, if I got the food, if I got the power, the strength, why should I give it up? And I think that love is a way to give it up for the woman and for the children, because otherwise he would not do it out of self-interest. And I think that, so it's a biological Darwinistic impulse to fall in love and feel it in the heart chakra towards the other person in order to give up your resources. It's just a hypothesis, but it makes a lot of sense. And I say this because I noticed that women do not love like men. And I ask myself, why? And when I was younger, I believed women love like men. And as I get older and I recognize women are saying something very interesting right now. Women are saying, and I've heard this a lot because I had a couple of videos that went viral on Instagram, and they were kind of like a little bit polarizing. And what women were saying is, now that we as women have our own money and can do what we want, we don't need to be nice to men because we already have that which men had. This is what they're saying right now. A lot of women are saying this, a lot of them. And I don't know any man who thinks like that, who would say something like that. But women are saying it, which means that women's actual um hypergamy and way of being attracted to men and going about, their biological processes is much more cold hearted and much more calculated than we are led to believe. Much more logical, actually, in a way. And the emotions are strong, but the emotions are very fleeting and changing, so that it allows them to make very quick changes in their direction. So one day they might be like this, the other day they're like this, because the biological process underlying this emotion, coming from the sacral chakra and the root chakra, is more like, "Oh, I'm just doing what is good for me. I don't care about the other person," because they're not truly on the heart chakra. And this is what a lot of modern women are saying, that now that we are not dependent on men anymore, we can do it this way. And so when I observed that, it was to me like, okay. So women are kind of saying, we are not falling in love anymore because we don't have to pretend to fall in love anymore. It's kind of the harsh kind of black pill. Um, I'm just putting these out as hypotheses, and it seems like there seems to be some truth to that, because they're actually saying it, and they don't feel that they need to hold back, because they're literally not dependent on it anymore, or they feel like they're not dependent on it anymore. So they feel much more free to say this, and there's a lot of trauma, of course, behind it, because they want to hurt the other person by saying it as well. But it's also the reality of things. And I think that when I listen to men, it seems to be a little bit different. The narrative and the things that they say seems to be different. So I think that still men fall in love with women much stronger. If the man feels that it's the right woman, he falls in love much stronger than the woman with the man. That's my observation after modern women changed so much and are showing their true colors. Men never needed to pretend. Men have been always independent in a way, so they never needed to pretend to be something. And now that women don't need to pretend, they're showing their true colors. Okay? So, and what I'm seeing is that in that situation, they're acting completely different than men in some ways. But the men are still completely falling in love with women. And I think that's literally because they are hardwired to fall in love in order to give up their resources. And then that would explain the simping, the massive simping. OnlyFans and all of these things can only work if there's massive simping. And why is there simping? because men are hardwired to fall in love with random women on the internet. Because if you're giving a woman 200 euros, right, or dollars for an OnlyFans account, you're not just doing it to jerk off, because you can do that on Pornhub. You are actually believing that you have some kind of relationship with her, because you're in actuality you're coming from the heart chakra. I know it sounds weird, but if you were truly coming only from the sacral chakra as a man, you would only use Pornhub. But you want the connection. You want the connection, and that comes from the heart chakra. You have these three relationship types: sacral chakra, heart chakra, third eye chakra. Those are the three relationship types. You're coming from the heart chakra, and you're believing. That's why it's so harsh. But the men, they experience it's almost like they want to be hurt on the heart chakra, and they know they're going to be hurt. They want to experience this kind of rejection because they probably have it as a trauma from the past. So it's very interesting, because this way, if you energetically understand how these things work, um, and you can unpack it, and then the puzzle of what's happening in the world is not a puzzle anymore. You recognize why everything is happening and why everything is as it is, because once you understand the energetic aspect of it, the chakras, the energy system, why one person acts this way, the other way, you it's it's a little bit harsh, because it takes about it takes away the whole romanticizing of our nature, of how we are. And I'm saying almost everything is driven by biological or primitive impulses or instincts. And the only thing, and that's why I'm saying there's only three energies: there's procreation, survival, and consciousness. And only if you're abiding in as consciousness itself, you are actually in that moment overriding the other two impulses, instincts. So 99.9999999% of people that don't recognize that they are mostly, or they're just consciousness, they are their whole life is focused only on survival and procreation. Everything, every little thing is connected to that, including with the fear of not surviving or procreating. Everything is that impulse. And that's why there's a huge, huge difference between people who awaken to the truth through Mooji, Eckhart Tolle, non-duality, and they truly recognized it, and the people that have no connection to it at all. This is like two completely almost different worlds of beings, because the ones that are not awakened, they are living just in the matrix. They're just living in the matrix, in their own matrix, in the matrix of their education, of their surrounding, and everything is just guided by these instincts and impulses, and the parameters of society. And so the thing is with spirituality is everybody can talk about it, but very few people have competence. And it's not like mathematics, and it's like religion. Everybody can talk about it, but few people actually know. And I think the interesting thing about spirituality is that you can really question everything. I'm speaking right now into this microphone, you're listening, but we are actually one. There is no me and you, there is no separation. So I'm actually speaking to myself as I speak. And as I realize that I'm speaking to myself, it's like then I can say, what is there a point to it? Is it just like that interplay of ping pong, like a game? Is it just like when the wind blows through the trees, so I'm speaking? Well, we have absolutely no idea what reality really is, we will have no way of knowing it. And just because we rest or abide in the self gives absolutely no understanding of reality. And what it gives you is a sense of detachment, but that's about it. So you can have a sense of detachment from your primary two instincts and impulses. You have a temporary detachment from your primary two impulses, and that's about it. And if you rest enough, you maybe get a glimpse of how everything is one, how there is no difference between you and me and the grass here, how everything is just one energy and one consciousness, and how even stretching out this hand is kind of an illusion. There is actually no hand, there is no space, there is no, it's just like if you were watching a monitor or being in a virtual reality 3D world, this is just a procedural uh procedural generation of something that's going on somewhere. Now, this is another theory that I have, which is super interesting. What if everything what if everything doesn't exist? Only you exist. So I don't exist in your world. What exists is only you with a procedural generation. Procedural generation means on demand generation to what your, let's call it soul or consciousness, wants to create at that moment, or creates because you have to learn something. So we assume that there is some outside. We assume there's a tree, we assume there's people, and we assume that there is me and them, and there's entities. Okay? Even if everything were one consciousness, then we assume that everything is a manifestation of that consciousness, right? But what if that manifestation of consciousness, if it doesn't really exist in a way that we think as an entity, like a tree or a human, but what it actually is a procedurally generated reality for the sake of your soul or your being or your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, to experience something. So when you think about these things, and there is a probability that these things which I'm saying is right, there's even a high probability that any like derivation of this kind of idea might be reality, the true reality. Then it becomes super bleak, because you recognize that you're actually in a prison. And I had this moment once where I kind of had a glimpse of this recognition. And for a moment, I had massive anxiety, because imagine yourself, just as an idea, I put you in a prison. The prison has no windows. It's completely dark. It has one door. I break the key. I lock the door. I break the key. And you will stay in there forever, ever, 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 ever. No limit. And it reminds me a little bit of a scene in The Foundation. It's a kind of the sci-fi series, which is very woke, but it has very good ideas. There is a moment where the kind of the ruler, I forgot the names, but the ruler of this society, they have like very modern technology. They can do all kinds of things. And they do a DNA analysis of like the person that they're trying to catch, who's like a terrorist in their land, and they eradicate their whole family tree. So they don't just eradicate like a couple of people in the family, they literally eradicated the whole DNA family tree, everyone that was involved in that family. And then they caught her and they put her in kind of like like in shells, handcuffs and stuff, so kind of like sci-fi handcuffs. And they took away basically their freedom. And then he said to her, we have the ability, I'm paraphrasing, he said, we have the ability to keep you alive forever. You're gonna be alive forever, ever. There's absolutely no limit. This is the perfect horror scene. You're gonna be alive forever. Think about this. You're gonna be alive forever, but you're gonna be imprisoned here, and you're gonna suffer and have pain forever, ever, because we have the ability to keep you alive. It's a sci-fi movie. What if? And I really love that scene because it shows that there is possibilities of a reality that we're discounting only because we like to romanticize things. So Hinduism comes up with reincarnation. If your vibration is high enough, then you go into another plane. And our, near death experience survivors that come back are like, ooh, that was so nice. I can look forward. I look forward to dying. We don't know. We have absolutely no fucking way to know what really is true. And that is really disconcerting. Yeah. How do you say disconcern? It's really like it really is intense. That's really intense to not know what this reality is. And we assume just because we're here and we're enjoying the food or a little bit of hedonism, we're like, that's like in the Matrix when he's eating the steak. It's like, I don't care if the steak is real or not. And I think that just the fact that I'm kind of like philosophically and spiritually inclined to ask myself these questions. And when I was 11 years old, I was already starting to have these kind of questions and be like, what is this reality about? And then when I was 18, and that was a very, 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 very key moment in my life. When I was 18, I was standing in the shower and I was like, this everything that we do in life is utterly pointless. There's literally no sense of doing anything. I wasn't even spiritually awakened yet. I mean, that came with 37, 35, 37. I don't remember. It's 37, I think. So now looking at this, there was already within my soul a clear realization that something is really weird about this reality. And no one asks themselves why, because everybody's so concerned about their first two chakras, survival and procreation. And spiritual awakening could be, it's a form to you know what spiritual awakening is? It's an attempt to pierce through what seems to be a fake reality. But we don't know if it stops short of the actual reality. So we're just getting a minuscule glimpse of what we think that is real. And of course you can say, oh, now I'm blissful and or I'm now in some kind of enlightened state, for sure. But there's absolutely no way to say that that is the ultimate reality. It's just an experience within the frame of the procedural generation that we've been given right now, in order to just keep you busy, for example. And I noticed one interesting pattern, super interesting pattern in life. And I noticed this with everyone, but from myself, of course, the strongest. Do you recognize one interesting pattern in life? That anytime you think you come to a sense of peace or quietness or that kind of like you can let go of for a little bit, do you recognize that every little thing that you experience in life, and even when you think you just came a little bit like to a rest, there's always something more to rattle you up again. So you're like, even thinking about, the organically on your organism, the things it has to do all the time: eat, drink, piss, go to the toilet, find food, and doesn't just go for humans, but think about like how we're constantly being kept. And I like this theory: being kept busy. We're being kept busy. Why are we being kept busy? Why is reality not in such a way that 90% of the time there's nothing to do? Why is reality constructed in a way that we are artificially being kept busy? And the interesting thing is there's always something extra happening in order to get you involved again. So when you think you can come to a rest, there's something that pulls you in again. And that pattern everyone has, and every life form has. It's super interesting. So when you think you're chilling, then suddenly you get tooth problems. When you think you're chilling, then suddenly, somebody else shows up. Then your car doesn't start. You need to repair it. It's always something. And that pattern is continuous, and it's super interesting to ask yourself why, actually. And I think if there was a human explanation to it, then I would say something is trying to keep us busy for some reason, whatever. Something, hi Daniel. Something is keeping us busy for some reason, why ever. That's now okay. It's very philosophical, but it's also spiritual, and it's very gloomy, and that kind of gloominess is unattractive. It's not romantic, and we try to discount it because we like to feel light. But life is not light. Life is definitely not light. This nature is brutal. If you lie down and don't do anything for 3 days, you're gonna have we are light. It's gonna eat you up. And I think of course, let's entertain the idea that we are light. Um it doesn't change a thing. It doesn't change our experience of the reality. So even if we saw ourselves as light, by the way, I met a woman. She went when Mooji was in Perugia. He went to visit Italy for like a few weeks, many years ago. Um, he was in Perugia and Assisi, and when at the non-duality conference, and when that was happening, science and non-duality conference, and when that was happening, I met a woman there. She was maybe mid 50s, 57, and she went with the bike. And 11 days, I believe it was 11 days, she went with the bike over the Alps, and it was an old bike and a luggage. You have these old suitcases, and it looked almost like a French movie when she was on the bike with that luggage. It's almost like out of a French movie, like on the countryside with 11 days. She was on the road with that old bike, and she came to the satsang. And so I started speaking to her. I was there with my ex-girlfriend, and I listened to her story, and her story is amazing. So it's a very short story, but it's amazing. So she never had anything to do with spirituality. She was married, and her husband had a dog, like a black, kind of bigger dog. I don't know what they're called. So, and she went to for a walk with the dog on a regular basis when the husband was at work. So, and then one day she took the dog for a walk. And this is super interesting because she saw everything suddenly, and she says this somehow was connected to the dog because I don't know. That's what she said. And she said she saw there was a moment she saw everything, including herself and the dog, and everything is light. Like it wasn't her perception was changed. She didn't see what we're perceiving right now, but she saw everything as light. And I believe these kind of stories because in my spiritual sessions, in my tantra sessions, women told me things that they started to see during the tantra session. For example, one woman started to see chakras, so she activated her ability to see chakras, which she didn't before have. Other people were seeing kundalini, trees. Was it an out of body experience? That's not what she said. Maybe she didn't say that. She didn't feel like outside of her body. I don't remember her saying that, but I remember saying she had it once more, and then she she uh her husband or her man and herself, they kind of separated, and and she didn't have the dog with her anymore because the dog was his, kind of. And then she never had that experience again, but that made her very spiritual, and that's what made her then go to the Mooji satsang. And I think this is super interesting because m- it's obvious she had some kind of, or obvious, it's highly probable she had some kind of emotional tension at that moment in time with the going apart with her man and stuff. And they probably have been long together, I don't know. And that might have induced also some kind of like change in her chemistry, my guess. And but there's everything is possible, even the grace from God and universe, whatever. And that story was interesting because it was anecdotal, hard facts, evidence. It was not something that I heard in a YouTube video. It was not something that was faked. It was not something that she made up. She was extremely humble, and it was obvious that the the you should have seen the bike. Like the bike was literally like an old French bike or something. It wasn't like a modern bike. It was an old bike where we could say like, why the fuck would you do it with this bike? But get a new bike. So it was like a regular old city bike. And she just had that thing where you kind of like open the, you go like zzz, and then you put in the luggage and and it snaps like to hold it in place. And that's all she had. And 11 days through the heat, it was pretty hot. I was like, what the fuck, what the fuck. And I think you would only do this, and you would be only ready to do this when you had a strong spiritual experience. Because everybody else would, if they do something like a bike, tour, they get a new bike, they get modern equipment, they get the appropriate bags and everything, all weather bags and the way you dress, everything. And I wanted to talk to her actually more, and we actually kind of, there were a couple of people that I connected with very well, but me and my ex-girlfriend, we were kind of like, she wasn't having it. It wasn't her frequency, the satsang. So I wasn't that flexible to just, you know, um, but that's also something that I realized as a tangent. As a spiritually awakened being, I feel like I can only be with a spiritually awakened woman. And every time I talk to a normal woman, which are most women, right? So I feel like this is gonna go nowhere. Like I feel like I already see the limits of the relationship, especially when they go then into the kind of, let's call it the drama mode or the blockage mode or the toxic metaframing mode. And of course, we've been talking a lot about metaphysical stuff right now. I could go into toxic metaframing also, which is a neologism I coined. Toxic metaframing is basically the ability to recognize toxic people and narcissists within minutes. And that is a massively good tool. And I have a couple of neologisms and concepts that I think are highly beneficial in life. One of them is understanding toxic metaframing, recognizing in people. The second is LiboPro, which is lifestyle boundary protection, not letting other people influence your lifestyle. We've talked about this in the beginning. Then libido suppression, libido empowerment, and lifestyle design, and also what I call uh, automated, artificially intelligence automated lifestyle design, which is something that more and more people are looking into, which is basically you using artificial intelligence to create the life you want without actually having to work. So a lot of people are trying to do that. I call this automated lifestyle design. And so we're seeing a lot of changes, and those changes are of course also spiritual, and because everything is spiritual, there's nothing that is not spiritual. And so we're going to see much more of that. And I think the people that are on the cutting edge of this kind of evolution, I think they also have a role to play in this kind of like spiritual evolution. I think it does um because we're moving into a new world, and this new world is being kind of split into the people that want to still stay in the matrix, the people that are waking up, and those this new world needs new ideas, it needs new direction, it needs new concepts, it needs new um ways of living together, and a lot of people experimenting with it, whether it's an off-grid community or even in urban areas, to rethink ideas, be more ecological or whatever. And we're seeing that people are experimenting with different lifestyles. And I think one of the most interesting lifestyles is the automated lifestyle design. It's basically using cutting edge artificial intelligence in order to get away from and a lot of it needs outside of the box thinking. And there's enough people on YouTube and in podcasts that are helping with that. It's outside of the box thinking for how can I use these things in order to, instead of living your life bound by the environment that has been given to you, by the parameters that you were born with, and the parameters of your surrounding, how about you change everything by making it more self centered or more human centric in a way? I explain it. That you say, what is my soul mission? What is my soul plan? What really completes me, like I was saying in the beginning? And then, and how do I want to live? And from that, design your surrounding and your work using AI in order to complete or to fulfill that vision. Instead of, and I think that's the natural evolution of where we're going. The original way we've been living is that you are raised on a farm or by a blacksmith or something, and then you eventually take over the business from the family or the farm or whatever. And then the second step was we had the cities, we had the kind of hygiene of the cities when the water started flowing, and then people moved into the cities because that's where the universities were, right? First, where the if you wanted to be learn something, you would go to the monks and you would go to the, to the monasteries, and then suddenly we had the universities, and you would move into the city where the universities are. And that became super interesting because all the young people are there, there's a bit of ambition, then you had the startups, you had the industrial evolution, then the startups. And now we're on the cusp of the next evolution, and the next evolution is literally the automated lifestyle design, where you're not thinking about what the environment gives you, but what do you truly want, and then design the environment or create the conditions in which the environment can change to your liking, based on your ability to earn and complete your work using AI. And that's a huge change. That's a huge, massive change that's coming towards us. And a lot of people are even psychologically, energetically not ready for that. And they're gonna lose their work, and they won't know what to do with it. And we're gonna see a lot of people losing work in the next 3 years, I would say. And one of the interesting things, I have a chart for this, and I'm not sure if it was, I think it was Elon Musk who posted it on X. Did you see the chart where China completely overtook the production of vehicles, of cars? Used to be Toyota, right? Used to be, and then you had the different markets, and it showed the tremendous increase in the last 3-4 years of Chinese output and selling of cars. And even here, I think I'm in near Badajoz in Spain. Even here, I saw a BYD, which I think is a Chinese car company. I saw the showroom here and the sales room, and as I was driving through the city, and it was like, wow, interesting. Here in a poor region of Spain, Extremadura, you have a BYD showroom, and and I was like, this is interesting. So basically, China, not only do they already own all the ports in Europe, basically Greek, Portuguese ports, and so forth, but they're basically overtaking the whole market. They're overtaking everything. And so we're going to see a lot of changes and a lot of jobs lost. And the politicians are far behind. They have no clue what's going on. So it's going to be super interesting. And sometimes I'm kind of, I don't know if there's an English saying for this, kind of like between chairs. I don't know which chair to choose sometimes, because on one side I'm like, just rest in non-duality and be like Mooji or Ramana, and let things just, see. And on the other side, there's an aspect to me which likes to be involved in, say, shaping my environment and shaping day-to-day activities. And I feel sometimes you have to choose. Yeah, I feel like you can't be in both worlds at the same time. And this is actually what Mooji says a lot of times. He says the snake cannot stay in the middle of the house. It cannot in the door of the house. It must be outside or inside. Or sometimes he used the analogy of the bridge. Like, you cannot stay in the middle of the bridge. You have to like go all the way. And I think it's becoming harder and harder, and I think it's because the messages that we're receiving through media, through short videos, through AI curated information, through the intensity, like I was talking about before, everything's getting more dense. A lot of fear is unconsciously, also consciously and unconsciously, in our minds, because we don't know what's going to happen. We know we're at the beginning of something completely new. And that, of course, that fear and that also excitement, both at the same time, draws you in like a drama movie. And you feel like you need to be somehow involved. You need to know what's going on. And that is, spiritually speaking, of course, not true. But it makes it super easy to say, okay, I'm just gonna doom scroll a little bit. Okay, I'm just gonna watch another video. Okay, I'm just gonna meet with people, watch a movie, whatever. It makes it super easy to avoid the deeper spiritual kind of contemplation and resting and abiding in silence. And the funny thing is that everything we've talked about and everything that I said, when you rest in silence and your mind is empty, then it literally then it literally doesn't matter. We think it does matter, but literally nothing matters. And so we could say, to kind of come to the end of the stream, we could say that even though I talked a lot and it seems interesting, at the same time, I could have said nothing and it would have been the same. Isn't that crazy? And that's it.